It's an open wound for Italy because the powers that be do not want the country to know the embarrassing truth.
The perpetrators of the attacks were at the end of a long chain.
The Italian state was responsible for the civil war in Italy.
No country in the world has witnessed so much violence, so many deaths, so much bloodshed.
Milan, the Piazza Fontana, in the shadow of the city's Duomo Cathedral. Right here, a few meters from this fountain, began the stragi, the Italian word for massacres. Piazza Fontana, some people claim, was where Italy lost its innocence. Piazza Fontana was 0 hour, the start of what would become known as the Years of Lead.
Venerdì 12 dicembre 1969, una data che ricorderemo per sempre. Orrore e sdegno. Sono questi i sentimenti che dominano tutti gli uomini di fronte a ciò che infrange le leggi elementari della convivenza. La violenza...
Friday, December 12, 1969. At 4:37 p.m., a bomb devastated the central hall of the National Agrarian Bank, the Piazza Fontana. Carnage ensued. 17 dead, 88 injured. Then, within the hour, 4 further bombs went off in Milan and in Rome, injuring another 17 people. No one claimed responsibility.
The mysterious nature of these bombings was meant to stir up a climate of fear. These were random attacks that could strike anyone at any time. Any one of us could be in a bank or a railway station, heading off on vacation. Some even took place in the month of August.
The country was in a state of shock. Piazza Fontana ushered in a new era. Never before had Italy experienced a terrorist attack of this scale. What the Italians did not know was that the Piazza Fontana bombing was the result of a conspiracy and the template for the wave of terrorist attacks to come. From the outset, the police investigation focused on far-left activists, specifically anarchistic movements, homing in on one person in particular, Pietro Valpreda, an anarchist militant and member of the mysterious 22nd of March movement. He and others were duly arrested a few days after the bombing, described in detail on television by the police authorities.
Quindi è probabile che l'attentatore che è venuto qua alla Banca dell'Agricoltura sia entrato con una valigia, si sia avvicinato a un tavolo ottagonale, abbia depositato sotto una sedia questa valigia e si sia messo a scrivere, a riempire un modulo. La sedia era qui, La sedia è no, la sedia era qua, dove c'è questa posizione nera. Si sia messo a scrivere? Si sia messo a scrivere e poi abbia acceso una sigaretta. Se dalla valigia sporgeva, come sembra dalle testimonianze di chi ha visto del fumo, un pezzo di miccia, quello con la sigaretta può avere toccato l'estremità della miccia, aver prodotto l'accensione, avere il tempo con tutta calma di pigliare il foglio che aveva compilato il modulo e allontanare.
The police insisted that this was exactly how it happened. Explosives were detonated by a lit fuse. And yet, just a few days after the attack, a secret memo from Italy's military intelligence service, the Servizio Informazione e Difesa, or SID, contradicted the official version of events and spoke of a time bomb. The same memo also accused far-right activists of having infiltrated the 22nd of March movement. Oddly, though, this explosive memo was suppressed. Investigating magistrates did not become aware of it until many years later.
Pietro Valpreda è un colpevole, uno dei responsabili della strage, delle stragi di Roma e della strage di Milano e degli attentati di Roma. La notizia, la conferma, è arrivata un momento fa qui nella questura di Roma.
Valpreda, an anarchist and the ideal culprit, was thrust into the spotlight. The conspiracy was underway. But despite the disinformation put about by the intelligence services, certain investigators were not taken in.
In the 70s, the magistrates investigating the Piazza Fontana attack realized they had to follow the black lead if they were to find the truth about the massacre. But when the intelligence services got wind of it, they did their level best to ensure that this lead could not be followed up.
The black lead was the one that led to the far right. In Italy, it was embodied by the MSI, the Italian social movement, a political party that had been popular since the 1950s. Operating beside the official face, though, were other smaller, more nefarious, and very active groups. The names of two neo-fascist activists soon cropped up in the investigation: Giovanni Ventura and Franco Freda, publishers and booksellers in the city of Padua in the northeast of the country.
Freda and Ventura were the leaders of a cell in Padua that had a score or so of members. Their activities were centered on a bookshop selling Nazi literature and esoteric material. The truth was that in this small bookshop, fueled by these books, the bombings were being planned.
The investigation eventually showed that Freda and Ventura had bought detonators and the leather bags containing the explosives. After their arrest in April 1971, Freda and Ventura denied having planted the bomb in the Piazza Fontana, but their statements highlighted the actions of the secret services.
The secret services played a twin role. On the one hand, they knew something was being planned in far-right circles, yet they did not intervene. They let the attacks take place because they were politically useful. Later, after the bombings, the secret services played a major role in muddying the waters by pointing the finger at those who were not the real culprits.
A journalist named Guido Giannettini established a link between the intelligence services, for whom he worked as an agent, and the Padua cell, whose job it was to carry out the bombings. When the investigating magistrates identified him, the secret service he worked for, the SID, denied that he was one of their sources. They found him and made him leave the country. He went to France, where he remained for a while, then he fled to Argentina.
The secret services, the police, the legal authorities, who was putting up the smokescreen? Just how far up the chain of command did responsibility for the attack lie? Did the intelligence services allow it to happen, or did they actually want the massacre? So why all this manipulation?
The attack at the Piazza Fontana and on the trains created widespread panic and generated public support for state intervention. Given that at any moment the state can offer more security in exchange for reduced freedom. But it was not fascist terrorists or enemies of the state who were pursuing this objective. It was people who actually worked for the state.
State terrorism? This shattering accusation was made from a prison cell in Milan by a black legend of the years of lead, Vincenzo Vinciquerra, convicted of a bomb attack in 1972, and the only far-right terrorist to acknowledge his crime.
I've been in prison for 36 years and 6 months because I made a choice. I confessed to being behind the Petiano bombing, in which 3 carabinieri were killed. From a judicial point of view, the only possible outcome was a life sentence. That's what happened, because that was my choice. I did not appeal, and ever since I have been in prison.
Vinci Guerra did not disown fascism, but he broke with the far-right movements, accusing them of having been in the service of a strategy, one whose name gained great notoriety in 1969, the strategy of tension.
Let me repeat what I said in court with regard to the strategy of tension. Destabilize the public order to stabilize the political order.
What became known as the strategy of tension began in 1969 with the Piazza Fontana bombing and lasted until 1974. Throughout these years, the approach was to cause mayhem by carrying out bombings all over the country, and thus provoke demands for more law and order, which could then be met by a coup d'etat or an attempted coup d'etat.
Let's go back a few years to understand why Italy proved to be such fertile territory for a strategy of tension.
Italy was first of all a country with limited sovereignty because it was a defeated country after the Second World War. It was therefore subjected to the obligations imposed by the victorious nations.
Because Italy is a country of frontiers, communism was just a short step away, right across the border. Also, we had the strongest communist party in Europe.
There was no way the Americans and British could stand by and allow this country to slip over to the red side, across the Iron Curtain, a term coined by Churchill, who described it as stretching from Stettin in the Baltic to the Italian city of Trieste in the Adriatic. During the post-war years, then, Italy became a key country in the Atlantic Alliance, having pledged its allegiance to the United States, which set up and controlled strategic military bases there.
Italy had to try hard to appear to be a normal democracy, but in reality, it was no such thing. The security apparatuses, that's to say the intelligence services and the military, were not subject to government control, as is the case in any other democratic or normal country. They were dependent upon foreign chains of command based in the countries that were victorious in the Second World War.
A top-secret American document written in 1951 by the National Security Council illustrated the hold the United States had on Italian domestic policy. It stipulates that in the event that the communists gain participation in the Italian government by legal means, or in the event that government ceases to evidence a determination to oppose communist threats, then the United States should take military measures.
I was in charge of all liaison with the Italian services, and CFAR at that time ran the entire Gladio operation.
Gladio, the double-edged sword, one of the best-kept secrets of the post-war period, the code name for the secret army intended to lead the resistance against any potential Soviet invasion. Now deceased, Mark Wyatt was the CIA's number 2 in Rome during the 1960s. He was the man who supplied the gladiators with money, training, and weapons.
They established the base in Sardinia. They accepted our man to be their aide inside of Gladio, to work and live with them. Very few people that were American intelligence officers and were assigned to Rome knew that there was a stay-behind operation going on, which the Americans had suggested and accepted by the Italians.
Over the years, the Gladio network came to specialize in the control of political opponents. I remember seeing documents in which it was perfectly clear that there were checks not only on Italian communists, but also on socialists, priests, and Catholic organizations, all those that represented progress or any kind of progressive political and social reform in Italy.
Despite its defeat on April 25, 1945, Italy never really settled its scores with fascism. American and British intelligence were able to lean on those who harbored a nostalgia for Mussolini, who thrived within the army, the Carabinieri, and the secret services.
C'era una parte, per esempio, del reducismo di Salò.
There were, for example, members of the former fascist Salo regime, the Italian Social Republic, who held positions in the apparatuses of the Italian state and the Anglo-American secret services, who had never given up on the idea of atoning for April the 25th, 1945.
Among them was a born leader, Giulio Valerio Borghese, seen here to the left of Il Duce. Nicknamed the Black Prince, he was the commander-in-chief of Decima Mas, the elite troops of Mussolini's army.
Aujourd'hui, je combats contre des Italiens. Aujourd'hui, je vous parle contre des Italiens quand je vous dis, par exemple, qu'un des ennemis les plus grands que nous avons dans notre pays, c'est les communistes, c'est des Italiens. Et ça ne me gêne pas du tout de dire que c'est des ennemis. Ça ne me gêne pas du tout de vous dire que si on pouvait les exterminer, je serais très content parce que ça libérerait notre pays d'ennemis qui y vivent et qui sont une menace perpétuelle.
Prince Borghese was worried in the wake of the electoral successes of the PCI, the Italian Communist Party, which made it the most powerful in Western Europe. Since the war, the Christian Democrats had held all the levers of power. But with 27% of the vote, the PCI, under the leadership of the very popular Enrico Berlinguer, had posted its best ever result in the legislative elections of 1968, just 1 year before the Piazza Fontana bombing.
In Italy, they called this period preceding Piazza Fontana the hot autumn because of the widespread labor conflicts. And that's the context in which these events need to be viewed.
Factories were going on strike. The university was a tinderbox. Social protest was at its peak, as it was all over Europe, and violence duly inflamed the campus. Beside the Communist Party, the far-left movements flourished. Lotta Continua, Potere Operaio, the Workers' Vanguard, and soon after, the Red Brigades. But these extra-parliamentary left-wing groups had not yet resorted to armed conflict. The hot autumn, then, was the background to the massacre of Piazza Fontana. What we now know is that the bombs of 1969 aimed to cause chaos as a prelude to a show of military strength, following the model of the coup instigated by the colonels in Greece 2 years previously.
La bomba di Piazza Fontana aveva un obiettivo.
The Piazza Fontana bombing had a specific goal. It was to elicit a demand for law and order in the emotional aftermath of the massacre, and that Giulio Valerio Borghese would use to create a coup d'etat.
Giulio Valerio Borghese, attraverso un colpo di Stato.
But in December 1969, contrary to the expectations of the plotters, Christian Democrat Prime Minister Mariano Rumor, seen here beside the Piazza Fontana wounded, did not declare a state of emergency. Prince Borghese's plans for a coup d'etat had to be postponed for 1 year, until the night of the 7th to the 8th of December 1970.
The Borghese coup d'etat has always been represented as something of a soap opera, a masquerade led by someone who was nostalgic for fascism and had a notion to overthrow the legitimate Italian government. That's how it was always represented. In reality, we know now that it was a terribly serious undertaking.
That night, Borghese, supported by numerous soldiers, deployed his men all over Italy, especially in Rome, where they seized the Ministry of the Interior. Before dawn, they planned to take over the Rai television channel to inform the Italian people that the president had been arrested.
But at the very last moment, I would even say the last second, their plan was called off. In Italy, it remained a mystery. We never found out why Borghese's coup d'etat was called off just as it was about to succeed.
This business of the counter-order has been much debated. There was probably a lack of top-level support, with the Americans failing to give their blessing to an undertaking that might be regarded as dangerous and indecisive, one that did not fulfill the necessary conditions, as had been the case in Greece.
Where did this counter-order come from? The Italian secret services, the CIA, maybe even the White House. President Richard Nixon had visited Rome that same year of 1970 to remind his hosts of the basic strategic framework.
I shall have the opportunity to visit the American Sixth Fleet and our NATO commanders as well, yours and ours, and to discuss there one of the primary indispensable principles of American foreign policy. And that principle is to maintain the necessary strength in the Mediterranean to preserve the peace against those who might threaten the peace.
The Nixon administration did not trust the irremovable Christian Democrats, and certain accommodating voices with regard to communists deepened their fears. Like that of Aldo Moro, one of the party's leading voices. Then current Minister of Foreign Affairs visiting Washington in 1974, he earned the wrath of U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. If you do not cease these conciliatory policies, you will pay a high price, the American strategist apparently told him.
Italian democracy was stuck. This was in the middle of the Cold War. Aldo Moro was trying to usher the Italian Communist Party into the democratic mainstream. The Communists had a presence in Parliament and could debate important measures alongside the majority party. Moro instinctively wanted to take things one step further and establish the PCI as part of the democracy.
A politically paralyzed Italy was thus plunged into a low-intensity civil war, caught between an increasingly violent far left and a far right instigating further random attacks along the lines of the Piazza Fontana bombing. July 1970, a bomb on a train in Calabria, 6 dead, 50 injured. May 1973, a grenade outside the Milan prefecture, 4 dead, 52 injured. (1974), a bomb on the Italicus train between Rome and Brennero, 12 dead, 44 injured. And then came Brescia, an anti-fascist demonstration against the outbreak of violence.
When my wife and I arrived on the square, we were looking for our friends. We spotted them beside a column where there was a trash can. A few meters away from them, a friend stopped to ask me something, and at that point, my wife and I were separated.
Io al primo momento pensai che fosse un petardo.
At first, I thought it was a firecracker, a cardboard bomb. As it exploded, I saw the column shatter. Then the whole crowd went down. I threw myself into the crowd of wounded bodies. I searched for my wife and found her. I realized that something really serious had happened. When we reached the hospital, a nurse told me right away that she was dead. I couldn't understand how it was possible.
Alongside Livia Milani, 7 other demonstrators died on the square of the Piazza della Loggia. A further 102 were injured. It was a new chapter to add to the bloody litany.
The investigation began with the objective of destroying evidence. 1 hour after the massacre, the firefighters were sent in to wash the square. But in doing so, they removed a series of extremely important pieces of evidence.
The investigation was confused, obstructed, and stonewalled, as had been the case for the Piazza Fontana and other attacks during the strategy of tension. Secret protection ensured the impunity of the true perpetrators of this terrorist plot. A small fascist group called Ordine Nuovo, New or New Order, a veritable nerve center of black terrorism.
Let's talk about the massacres in banks and railway stations, on trains, in squares. They were all the work of New Order. They were not acting as neo-fascists, neo-Nazis, far-right activists, rather as part of a hidden structure linked to the Italian and American secret services.
What emerged from the inquiry, which was absolutely new, was that the New Order activists in Venezia, having trained in how to handle weapons or make bombs, came and went to and from certain American bases, where they were treated almost as allies.
Militant activists attended the funeral of their idol, the Black Prince, Junio Valerio Borghese.
Que pensez-vous du fascisme de Mussolini? Qu'il a fait le possible pour faire un grand pays.
Among them was Pino Rauti, the founder of New Order. His name crops up in the legal documents dealing with all the bloodiest attacks of the period.
Que fera votre parti si les communistes arrivent au pouvoir?
Nous examinerons la situation et nous ferons tout ce que la situation rendra nécessaire.
C'est-à-dire?
Nous lutterons avec tous les moyens, aussi avec les moyens légaux.
10 years earlier, in 1965, in the salon of a Roman hotel, Pino Rauti took part in a founding congress, captured on film. The cream of the far right gathered to discuss the best way to contain the Red Peril.
It was a meeting of all the coup instigators from the Italian army, who gathered around them a team of promising youngsters. These weren't soldiers, but they would write the history of subversion for many years to come.
Among these promising youngsters was Guido Giannettini, who would later be implicated in the Piazza Fontana bombing. Along with Rauti, he endorsed the principles of the OAS, the anti-revolutionary secret army that led the war in Algeria. It was the model that underpinned the Italian neo-fascist movement and the strategy of tension.
The OAS had a dramatic role in Italy. The OAS was a model, the inspiration for the Italian far right and their battle against international communism.
Bologna railway station, Saturday, August 2nd, 1980. The summer holidays were just starting. At 10:25 a.m., in the second-class passenger waiting room, a bomb exploded. 85 dead, more than 200 injured.
My mum was right above the waiting room where the bomb had been planted. And at 10:25, she was there, at work. I was at home. I heard about it on the TV.
Gli orologi che danno sul piazzale si sono fermati. Così la vita di 78 persone, quasi 200 i feriti.
My naive reaction was to run to the telephone and dial 37 22 21 in desperation. I can still remember it, the phone number for the office where my mum worked. She was the last one they found because she had stayed upstairs in the office, which had not collapsed. I was told the following day at 2 a.m.
Behind the bloodiest attempted attacks of the years of lead can be found the same far-right nebula. It would take another 15 years and the persistence of the victims' families to bring the material perpetrators of the attack, a couple of neo-fascist activists, to justice.
The truth is inevitably only part of the story, a legal ruling on who actually committed the crime. We believe that a piece is missing with regard to the political initiators. That's to say, those who supported, assisted, and allowed, one way or another, the act to be committed.
If the instigators of the massacre were never discovered, it is undoubtedly thanks to the maneuvers of this man, convicted for obstructing justice in the course of the inquiry. Licio Gelli, the venerable master of a Masonic lodge known as Propaganda Due, or P2. Here he is filmed under house arrest at his Tuscan villa. From Borghesi's attempted coup to the Bologna bombing, the shadow of Gelli looms large over every despicable news story in latter-day Italy. He was driven by a single motive: to keep the communists away from government, a priority objective for Italy's American friend as well.
When I went to interview Licio Gelli at Villa Vanda, I have to say I was extremely disappointed. I expected a diabolical intelligence, a fascinating character, some kind of a Beelzebub figure. What I found, though, was an old man babbling on about a very authoritarian political system. He showed me photographs of Mussolini, whom he greatly admired. He was basically a fascist.
Gelli emerged from the shadows in 1981 during investigations into the collapse of a bank implicating the Mafia, the Vatican's banker, and P2. The Carabinieri searched his villa and discovered a treasure: 179 gold lingots and, more importantly, a list of 962 names affiliated to the Masonic Lodge.
There were the names of 3 ministers, the Minister of Justice, 40 or so members of Parliament. There were several carabinieri, and of course high-ranking police officers, including the Commander General of the Financial Police. Among the carabinieri were 2 of the 3 generals commanding the 3 Italian divisions. And there were the names of almost all the people within the secret services that had obstructed the magistrates' investigations to find those responsible for the bombings.
A parliamentary committee charged with investigating P2 turned up several names, such as that of Gianadelio Maletti, head of Italian counterintelligence. Convicted of misleading the investigation into the Piazza Fontana bombing, he fled to South Africa. Another P2 member was Maletti's superior, General Vito Micheli, head of the SID, who was implicated in Borghesi's attempted coup. Also on the list were the names of several industrialists, newspaper editors, and a member who, in the early 1980s, was but a modest entrepreneur.
The parliamentary committee concluded its work by describing a pyramid with another upside-down pyramid sitting on top of it. One pyramid above, one pyramid below. Gelli was at the apex, where the pyramid's summits met. The pyramid below was made up of P2 members. The pyramid above was the part of the establishment that agreed with the thoughts and actions of P2.
Many people thought they had finally identified the brains behind all the horrific and criminal goings-on that had beset Italy during the post-war period, from mafia activities to terrorism. In reality, what was P2? It was a protected, secret, covert Masonic lodge, which acted as a haven for the most orthodox kind of Atlanticism.
Shadows, traps, manipulation and conspiracy. The tragic strands that Pier Paolo Pasolini was trying to pull together in one of his final newspaper columns, just a few months before his mysterious murder on the beach in Ostia in autumn 1975. Pasolini, writer, filmmaker, left-wing sympathizer, and Italy's guilty conscience.
Pasolini's murder is one of Italy's great mysteries. At the time, Pasolini was writing a front-page column for the Corriere della Sera that the subversives, the state apparatuses, and the protagonists in this story did not wish to hear.
I know the names of those behind the bombing in Milan on December 12, 1969. I know the names of those behind the bombing in Brescia during the first months of 1974. I know the names of those that make up the summit of the pyramid. I know the names of those who implemented the strategy of tension. I know it because I am an intellectual, and my job is to analyze facts. I know, but I can provide no proof or even evidence.
They shut him up forever, and his massacred body became the symbol of an Italy which, through a series of murderous attacks, had been massacred to prevent the truth from coming out.
The truth. Italy is still waiting for the judicial truth. Aside from the Bologna bombing, none of the perpetrators of the far-right attacks has ever been convicted. Is their identity concealed here, behind the walls of the National Archives, among the thousands of pages still stamped top secret, which the government has promised to declassify? And when will some light be shed on another chapter in the Italian trauma, a crime from which the country has never fully recovered?
Andiamo ad avvicinarci per cercare di capire di capire meglio. Ecco la macchina con i corpi degli agenti che facevano parte della scorta e l'onorevole Moro è stato rapito.
An hour after the Via Fani slaughter, the Red Brigades claimed the abduction of Aldo Moro, the Christian Democrat president. That morning he was on his way to the Chamber of Deputies to solve an unprecedented government crisis and ratify his vision of the compromesso storico, or historic compromise, an agreement between his party and the communists. 2 years earlier, in 1976, the legislative elections were a triumph for PCI. Polling at 34% of the vote from 11 million voters, it was well placed to pressurize the Christian Democrat government.
Berlinguer, head of the Communist Party, had been making conciliatory noises with regard to NATO. The Communist Party was a totally democratic party, while the Christian Democrats were Italy's first party, the Popular Party. It was an important moment in Italian politics.
The implacable front of opponents to the historic compromise was unwavering. The United States, the P2 Masonic Lodge, the far right. But it found on the far left an objective and decisive ally, and it remains one of the country's biggest mysteries. In the mid-1970s, black had given way to red on the terrorist stage. Red as in the brigades of the same name that had taken up arms. At the instigation of their leader, Mario Moretti, the Brigate Rossi plunged the country into a spiral of violence. Moro was alive, but the photograph of him, looking haggard, positioned in front of the five-pointed star of the leftist terrorist, petrified Italy. His incarceration lasted 55 days, while the nation held its breath. 40 years on, a parliamentary committee is still exploring the mystery. The $64,000 question is, were the Red Brigades manipulated?
The Red Brigades talked about the CIA, Israeli participation, in the KGB with Czechoslovakian ramifications. They spoke about white and about black.
Did anybody else work with the brigades on the kidnapping? 91 shots were fired, 49 of which came from just one gun. The five-man escort was murdered, while Moro escaped unharmed. The military blitz was clearly orchestrated by skilled professionals.
It is simply not credible that only brigade members were involved. But there is one incontestable fact. That morning, a certain Colonel Guglielmi was in the area. Who was Colonel Guglielmi? He was a Gladio instructor who taught ambush techniques in Sardinia to the special units training at Capo Marraju. Another coincidence, you see how they mount up? The Moro affair is full of coincidences.
Some coincidences and a lot of mysteries. Aldo Moro was incarcerated in an apartment in the south of Rome. While there, he was forced to answer questions from his prosecutor, Mario Moretti, leader of the Red Brigades. Every evening, Moretti crossed the whole city to return to his hideaway at 96 Via Gradoli in the north of the city. It was a hell of a risk for the most wanted man in all of Italy. It was almost as if he knew he could come to no harm.
Nel palazzo di fronte, Via Gradoli 89.
Right across the road, at 89 Via Gradoli, lived a Carabinieri NCO, an officer in the military secret service. Moretti was seen speaking with this officer. He was clearly an informer for the intelligence services.
Even more troubling, 1 month after the kidnapping, this Red Brigade's hideout in Via Gradoli was discovered. But the authorities inexplicably alerted the press instead of closing in on the brigade members who had plenty of time to escape. 20,000 mobilized men, 37,000 house searches, the aptly titled Plan Zero wore its name well.
There had been a large-scale mobilization, or so it seemed.
After 1 month of captivity, The Red Brigade's 6th communiqué announced that the People's Court had tried Moro and that he had been sentenced to death. In his cell, Moro wrote. He wrote a lot, almost 100 letters trying to influence his fate.
These letters are addressed to close family and friends, to senior politicians, to the representatives of institutions, the President of the Republic, the President of the Chamber of Deputies, Prime Minister Andreotti. In them, Moro asks for his release to be negotiated.
The terrorists announced their readiness to exchange Aldo Moro for the release of 13 Red Brigade's members whose trials had begun a few weeks earlier. If you do not intervene, a terrible page in Italian history will be written. My blood will fall on you, on the party, on the country. Despite demonstrations of support for Moro right across the political spectrum, his prophecy failed to sway his influential friends. The government, under Christian Democrat Giulio Andreotti, along with the Communist Party, took a hard line and refused to negotiate.
The hypothesis of a negotiation was unworkable. It was unworkable because the members of Moro's escort, carabinieri and policemen, had been killed. That made it very difficult, very delicate, to open negotiations.
Si è dichiarata guerra allo Stato. Ma lo Stato democratico risponde con dichiarazioni di guerra.
The decision to adopt a firm line was perhaps also influenced by the knowledge that in captivity, Moro was writing not only letters.
E questo è il nostro dovere.
He was also writing his memorial, a kind of civil and political testament.
Then there is the business about the memorial, that's to say, Moro's writings in captivity. A typed copy of them was found in October 1978. Not until 1990 were photocopies of the manuscripts found. And still today, the originals are missing.
Where are the originals? Who hid them? Yet another mystery. Do they contain the key to Moro's tragic fate?
I'm really not able to say to what extent secret information relative to state security was passed on by Moro to the Red Brigades. I'm just really not able to do that.
The memorial contains some explosive material. Talks about Gladio. And says a lot about the general workings of the secret services in relation to the Italian state. He says a lot of not very nice things about Giulio Andreotti.
Andreotti, the historic Christian Democrat and head of the government, whom Moro accused of having links with the Americans and the secret services. It was Andreotti himself who eventually revealed the existence of Gladio in 1990. Did he fear that the prisoner, once released, would disclose embarrassing secrets? Was Aldo Moro sacrificed for reasons of state?
Pronto? È il professor Franco Dritta? E chi parla? Brigate Rosse. Va bene? Ha capito? Sì. Ecco, non posso stare molto al telefono. Lei deve comunicare alla famiglia che troveranno il corpo dell'onorevole Aldo Moro in via Caetani. Via Caetani. Va bene? Sì. Lì c'è una Renault 4 rossa. I primi numeri di targa sono N5. Devo telefonare io alla famiglia? No, dovrebbe andare personalmente. E non posso. Non può? Dovrebbe per forza. Per cortesia, no. Mi dispiace. Lei dovrebbe andare dalla famiglia dell'onorevole Moro, perché l'ultima volontà dell'onorevole è questa, cioè di comunicare alla famiglia, perché la famiglia doveva riavere il suo corpo.
The body of Aldo Moro was found in the trunk of a Renault 4, symbolically parked halfway between the headquarters of the Christian Democrat Party and the Communist Party, riddled with bullets.
Serviva morto più che alle Brigate Rosse allo Stato italiano.
More than the Red Brigades, it was the Italian state itself that needed a martyr before bringing to a bloody end Moro's political strategy of working with the left.
Di Moro, che era quella dell'apertura a sinistra.
The gondola of revolution sails along a river of blood, said the revolutionary liturgy. The Red Brigade's bloody madness inflicted upon Italy dozens more murders and kidnappings. But with the execution of Moro, they signed their political death warrant. The murder of Moro sounded the death knell for historic compromise and fatally poisoned the Christian Democrat Party. The shockwave also swept away the hopes of the Communist Party. History would do the rest. Some years later, a man would emerge from the ashes of the years of lead to prosper and begin another chapter in Italy's tragic tale.